What's up, vape fam? So this is the video I was talking about. We're going to go over how you can vape higher wattage without drastically increasing the heat, basically. It's pretty simple. I mentioned it in the Hammer of God V3 video because it's a 325 watt build, and I've seen the comments that I've been getting on some of these videos. Oh, it's not safe to vape over 200 watts. It's this, that, and the other thing. It's too hot. The wattage isn't the heat. People get this mixed up a lot. If you take the same build, the exact same build, so let's say you have a 0.2 build that you're running on an RX200, and you just increase the wattage, yeah, you're going to increase the heat. You're going to decrease the ramp time. But if you have two different builds, it's two different things completely. It's apples and oranges. It's not a straight comparison. So what I have here to show you, and well, actually before we get to that, a lot of people get to this mech mod mentality. You know, if you have your tube mod, you have to build lower to get more wattage out of it, right? So they instinctively start thinking that a lower ohm build means that it's made for higher wattage, which isn't necessarily the case. And I'm going to show you here in a second, but when you get into like series, you get into high wattage devices, you don't have to worry about that so much. You want to build higher. You want to build surface area. Surface area is the key. The more wire there is, the less heat there is at the exact same wattage. And I'm going to show you here. These two builds, these are both 24 gauge G-Plat Elite. This is a little tiny little 5-wrap guy. And this is paralleled 24 gauge 10-wrap. So when you parallel, you cut the resistance in half. And when you double the wraps, trick or treat's over, but there's a bunch of kids running around screaming, so my dog's going nuts. Don't mind that. So you parallel it, you cut the resistance in half, and then you double the wraps, and then you double the resistance. So these two coils ohm out to the exact same thing. Now, one is 4 times the amount of wire. So at 4 times the amount of wire, and just to show you, this comes out to a 0.23. This is the larger one. There might be a 0.01 or so difference just because of the lead lengths, because I had to leave these a little bit longer. It's not too bad to get this small coil to fit in there. Oh, also 0.23. Exactly the same, spot on. So now if I put this into fire mode, and I'm going to tell you when I press it. Ready? Press. Heats up pretty quick. Get this off without burning myself. That's the key. Now I put this larger coil back on here. Also in fire mode. And I'm going to tell you when I press it. Press. Still holding it. There we go. You see how much longer that took to heat up. Now, they're the same wire, they're the same gauge, so when they glow, they're reaching the same temperature. So the reason it took so much longer is because that heat has to dissipate over so much larger of an area, which means that in order to get to that same temperature at the same amount of time, you would have to increase the wattage. So basically, this coil can take more wattage to get to the same temperature as this smaller coil. The exact amount of wattage, I don't know. It's not going to be double, but if this one took 40, 50 watts to get to that temperature, this one might take, well, 75 to get there in about the same amount of time, so it's going to be close. But it's the same basic concept when you're building like this. I have 3 large fuse Claptons in here, so even though it's 325, let's say 300 watts, each coil is dissipating heat over a large area, and it becomes more pronounced once you get the cotton in saturated, because now you have a larger area in contact with juice, which means it's cooling a larger area as well. So honestly, if you want to build higher wattage, build larger coils. And you can build the same ohm, the same resistance as I just showed you here, parallel, increase the wraps, comes out to the same thing. But it's not going to help you as much when you get into tube mods and things like that, because you don't have as much wattage to work with as you do with like an RX200 or a series box. So let me put this back up here. So a lot of people who run tube mods, mech mods, things like that, don't really buy into these surface area builds because they don't have the wattage to push the surface areas. Again, like when I was just firing that was a single battery output. So that was the amount of time it would take to heat this coil on a tube mod, the large coil, versus the amount of time it would take to heat the smaller coil. And there's a drastic difference. But when you get into a Hammer of God, I apologize for the cut. People outside were screaming, yelling, and making my dog go crazy, and I just decided to cut that out. I hope I remember to cut that out. So surface area is the way to go to keep your heat down when increasing your wattage. It should be pretty self-explanatory, but I've watched a few videos on YouTube and nobody really covers it really well. And again, you know, it's not going to apply to tube mods the same way because you don't get to regulate the amount of power going into your coil. So if you build a ton of surface area, just like on this, it takes a long time to heat up and the vape's not going to be that great. Unless you really don't like heat in your vape, and then that might be the way for you to go. So getting more surface area can be done in a lot of different ways. One, parallels, increasing the amount of strands of wire used. This will decrease your resistance, obviously. More coils will also decrease your resistance, but like a pair of coils, triple, quad, octo coils, those will decrease your resistance but add surface area to your overall build. Adding more wraps is an option that will increase your resistance, so that's a good thing to keep in mind if you're trying to build series. If you have to get your ohms a little bit higher to vape safely on a series box, please vape safely on a series box. Adding wraps is a good option. And even things like using strands that won't carry load. So let's say you're running, my dog, let's say you're running, I don't know, parallel 26 gauge. If you added a strand of like 28 gauge into the mix, those two strands of 26 gauge now have to heat up that strand of 28 gauge because it is a larger resistance wire than the two strands of 26 gauge, which will be lower resistance wires because of the size of them. So they now are the load carrying wires and have to apply their heat to the 28 gauge wire, which means it's going to be slower to heat up. All of these are options. Thick Clapton wire actually insulates a lot more than you would think. Like 32 gauge, even 30 gauge if you can get around it. It will bring the heat down more than you would think. Good RDAs for it, 30mm RDAs. That's why you see me doing so many Vapors Cloud reviews, because I buy a lot of their 30mm RDAs. The Profit's great because it lets you build a triple coil setup, which means you get to add an extra coil, increase your surface area. Things like the Buddha are good because they're just big open areas that allow you to add more wraps and fit it inside. You have options like the Alliance stuff. They've got a lot of really big stuff. The Fatboy RDA is like a 46mm that you can run octo coils in. I have a couple Vicious Ant Goliaths up there, an authentic and a clone, that let you run 4 or 8 coils, whatever you can fit into it. There are plenty of options for getting surface area builds. There are tons of builds on the internet. Fuse Claptons are a great way to go because it's 2 strands already, and then you get to add the Clapton around it, so there's a good amount of heat insulation there. So guys, I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any more questions, things that I didn't address, I'm pretty sure I covered it all, unless some of it gets cut out because of the people yelling, but I don't think it will. Again, 2 coils, drastically different. See how small that one was? There you go. 5 wraps of 24 gauge versus 10 wraps of 2 strands of 24 gauge. All out the same, and you saw how different the ramp time was. Wattage controls the ramp time. Temperature is what you're actually worrying about when you get into your vape. People focus way too much on wattage. Way too much on wattage. Tanks, same thing, like we said. Kanger tank versus the TFV4 are not going to vape the same at 60 watts because there's going to be significant difference in surface area. Yeah, I think we about covered it all. I really want to get this video done so I can get this tank done and the Noisy Cricket 25 done. Those need to get done hopefully this week. Bunch of juice lines. Alright, so all in all, guys, I hope you found this video helpful. Like, subscribe, it helps me out. Have any questions, comments, anything I didn't address, leave it down in the comments below. I do my best to get to it, but they changed my shift around at work, so now I'm on day shift, and I feel like I have no time for some reason. I'm sleeping way too much now. Like always, hope to see you guys again soon. Until next time, suck, blow, and keep on vaping.